So the tide's been turning for a while now. It's like the whole world's been on a fear porn bender for a year. It's only now that rational thought is starting to seep in, but only slightly. There's not too much hope there, but there's some. It's only now that they're questioning stuff that any rational thinker brought up a year ago, like, how is it that folks who've been eating what could be deemed as, exotic cuisine for hundreds of years just now happen to eat something that caused a global respiratory pandemic that was a complete fluke and totally natural. Totally natural. Nothing suspicious about it. Ate a bat, got sick, got a chest cold and spread it to the whole world. Totally natural. Well, now they're just starting to come around to the idea that it probably wasn't what they said it was, right? Our beloved Fauci, who's been wrong about everything all the time and still has a job, and the unyielding loyalty of the national press, he's starting to steer the sheep into believing this so-called lab leak theory. But only just, he's guarding his lemons here. He's not going to come right out and say that, yeah, that's probably what happened. He's just now saying that they can't say that that's not what happened, right? It's this thing politicians can do where they can, deny any accountability while somewhat leaking out something within the vicinity of the truth, or something along those lines. But who knows? It doesn't matter how many folks, including myself, who got banned videos and deplatformed for theorizing stuff like this forever ago. Now the so-called experts are changing their tune. And I think the most efficient way to earn the title of expert in this day and age is to just be wrong all the time. That's how you become an expert. That's the job description, just be wrong all the time. Today it's lab leaks, tomorrow, who knows? The vaccines maybe. They were shocked about the side effects a couple of weeks ago that we knew were coming since last summer. So expect them to reverse course on that in due time. Maybe, who knows? But like most of the stories we're gonna go over today, I'm not sure what this means. When the mainstreamers start singing a new song, it's time to get worried. When the Faucis of the world come out and start spouting stuff that you might have heard at a Trump rally, like back in November, like maybe it's time to get worried. And they're gonna pretend that this is new and it's like, oh, we haven't seen this before. Oh, the beloved doctor has come out with new information. Nobody's speculated on this so far. At least, they won't even give you context that this has been a widely held theory from day one. But when they start, singing out of this, particular hymn book, it's time to get worried. Don't celebrate this one too much. I suspect it's part of a wider plan to fuck with China. Case in point here. Maybe make people forget that the US and, the departments that they run, a lot of them, with Fauci himself, helped pay for a lot of these gain-of-function experiments in Wuhan specifically. These experiments that they're paying for, and there's that word again, experiments. Hope you've signed up for your shot and donut, but these experiments, they're starting to, they're probably going to zero in on how it's all China's fault and blame the Chinese. These people who are all about their anti-Asian hate and all of this stuff, they will not hesitate to throw China under the bus and all the Chinese folks and probably all the Asian folks for good measure, if it means that they get to skate on by without any accountability. So only a matter of time before you see them just really start to drive the message home that this is all China's fault and maybe it was deliberate and now we need to beef up our security, pay more taxes so that we can make sure that China never does this again somehow. Always comes back down to money. You're gonna ask a whole lot of questions that really have no relevance at all. You're gonna keep asking completely, off the point questions that are just going to serve no other purpose than to distract people. They can't confirm where this thing came from or why it does what it does by their own logic, but they've got a vax for it, right? And this vax is so effective that they refuse to check if you've gotten antibodies after getting the shot. And that's straight out of the FDA. Don't take my word for it. Take their word for it. Antibody testing is not currently recommended to assess immunity after COVID-19 vaccination. And this is straight from the people who authorized, not approved, but authorized these shots in the first place. We were just speculating a couple of days ago. Why don't they sell people on the idea of this shot by doing mass antibody testing and showing everybody, hey, look at all these COVID antibodies you got now that you've gotten your shot. Isn't this great? And you can come back as many times as you want to, keep track of this stuff. Possibly over the course of several months. This is how many antibodies you had in March, and now here's how many you have in December, and here's how many you have a year later, and this is how effective it is because this is how many antibodies you have from 1 month to the next. They're not going that route. They're going the completely opposite route, which is, don't do it. Don't do it. Trust us, it's working. Just don't check to see if this thing that gives you immunity shows signs in your body of that immunity. Science. The experts have spoken, the science is settled, move on. Anyway, Fauci is just, one of the gods of 2020 that's taking a beating right now because this hurts him on some level. His devout followers who have his likeness, have his image on their pillows or whatever the fuck. Like, even they must be having a hard time defending him. But he's just one of the folks who, stepped up and ascended to the heights in 2020. He's just one of them that's taking a beating right now. The others, they're not faring too well either, Here's his boss, good old Billy here. He's still in the shit thanks to his divorce, and it seems to be getting worse, right? We called this, back in February when he was, spouting off about the Texas power grid, and then he switched gears a couple of days later and said that we all needed to eat synthetic, chemically grown meat because cow farts would kill us all, right? That was his latest decree back in February, March. And we started to suspect back then that his handlers had just kind of let him off the leash because he was just straight up batshit by that point. So obviously nobody was coordinating his movements, so to speak. No one was yanking him into place to tell him, hey, don't do this particular thing just yet. Just, stay off the radar. We'll craft a statement for you, any of that stuff. No, he was off the cuff and going full on everything. He was sticking his nose in everything. And when we suspected it was because he's probably on his way out, and that probably means something worse is going to have to step in to fill that void left by our favorite billionaire. But the headlines say now that Bill Gates will never be the same. The aura that Gates has built over the past 2 decades may be permanently shattered. Oh, how sad. How sad, really. It's heartbreaking, everybody. It's tough to see a good man fall. It really is. Now they're starting to make the Epstein comparisons that a lot of folks were talking about last year. How is this guy who's been known to hang out with pedophiles, how is he the #1 source of medical information in the world today? Those were the comparisons. But anyway, took the mainstreamers a while to get there, but they're there now. And it all ties back to his divorce. And, apparently, wives don't like it when you hang out in private jets that serve champagne with a side order of teenage pussy. Who knew? Who knew? He's an enemy of the state now, so to speak, the social media state. But his totalitarian ideas, they're still mainstream, and they're still somehow the law of the land in many places. Mr. Lockdown, Mr. Vaccinate Everybody with no exceptions, that guy is now, never gonna be the same again, but his ideas live on to be championed by other people. Fortunately for us, some of those other people, they're taking a beating too. Here's Cuomo. I don't even know what he's done now. After killing old folks and sexual misconduct, was he groping people or making innuendo or some shit? Just the guy's being an overall dickbag. But he still got a job, and now the New Yorkers think that he should resign, which is no different from really any other day, pre or post-pandemic. This man was on the verge of becoming the next president, apparently, last year. Yeah, about this time last year, he was probably the most celebrated politician in the country. And now, you know, not so much. And his partner in crime on the opposite coast, Mr. Newsom, he's dishing out free money so Californians can forget that he turned their state into an outdoor toilet. You know, more stimulus checks, he says. More money for people who won't work. And that's going to be great for a state that's on the verge of bankruptcy in a lot of different ways. And that just might help him avoid his, you know, recall defeat. And I suspect that it just might. That's the sad part. It is actually dishing out free money like you do in a third world country to get people to vote for you. It's probably gonna work. So we're probably gonna have to deal with this guy for a while. Like, he's like morphing into Nixon. Like, when you look at his face and his hair and everything, like, he's a lot taller, but he's slowly starting to take on some of those features, like the curved nose and all this stuff. Like, he looks like he's from that bloodline somehow. But he's taken a lot of reputational damage. I don't really care so much about the Newsoms and the Cuomos. I have my own personal favorite. Good old Whitmer, the greatest Michigander of all time, was caught a couple of months ago using campaign funds to pay for private jet flights to Florida. Take a moment to bask in the irony of that. A devout climate change prophet, right, who is always telling folks to reduce their carbon footprint because we're all gonna die if we don't. She's using their money to pay for a private plane that traveled to a so-called COVID hotbed state that she herself told them not to go to. Use their money. Hypocrisy on steroids. The balls on this woman. The sheer balls on this woman. I'd take her over Newsom and Cuomo any day because she has got to be the biggest of them all. Like, she looks at you when she spouts this nonsense without the slightest hint of, like, you know, scaling it back just a little bit. Like, she is completely devoid of any sense of self-awareness. Completely devoid of it. And that's why she's our favorite, really. And even, I think, CNN are laying in on her. Take a look at this.
This is the governor violating her own COVID protocols. Supposed to be 6 people at a table maximum. She says she went out for drinks with friends. More friends showed up. Everybody was vaccinated, so they pushed the table together. Okay, that happens. But when you're a governor and you set the rules, you have to follow the rules. That's the way it has to work. That's hypocrisy.
Yeah. That's hypocrisy. CNN calling out hypocrisy. The Communist News Network. They're gonna come out and tell everybody about hypocrisy. And now they're going after one of their sacred lambs. Good old Whitmer. And so on top of the whole plane thing, apparently she violated more of her COVID rules. Don't expect them to chew her out, you know, day in and day out like they do when it comes to Republicans and whatnot. But it may be a sign that they're done with her, maybe. You know, they might get somebody else to fill that void. But she's not gonna give up so easily because there's a new layer to arguably one of our favorite stories from 2020. Probably our favorite story, really. Like, there were some humdingers, but Whitmer's kidnap extravaganza, that's gotta be top of the list. One of the many now forever banned into the ether videos that we did before the first channel got completely scrubbed off of YouTube. She's deflecting using that story again. And if you recall, the crux of that whole mess was that there were a bunch of yahoos who had a bunch of phone calls where they just talked about what they wanted to do to said governor. Just talked about it. This governor who, by the way, possibly ruined their lives with her insane lockdown ideas. They just talked about it. and they didn't actually get around to doing anything. It was suspected that they were possibly amassing funds to do some stuff, whatever that means, right? A lot of talk, essentially. But the charges against those ones who, I guess at the time, admitted some form of guilt, because as I recall, there was a bunch of folks, and then a bunch of them said, no, we're not guilty of anything. And some others said, well, we may be guilty of some stuff, and they're the ones they've still got locked up, as far as I'm aware. I don't know. It was very vague. They were very light on the details. It was very hard to get any sort of information about these people who are apparently one of the biggest threats in the country. But anyway, the charges have been amplified. Give a listen to this.
Judy, according to federal law enforcement, the militiamen trained with guns and weapons of mass destruction, powerful bombs that were allegedly going to blow up bridges near Governor Gretchen Whitmer's Michigan Lake House and take out her security detail and responding police. These new charges against several accused militiamen could put them away for life.
I'm going to pause there for just a second. All right, again, these guys are having a phone call, and now they are being given the Saddam Hussein treatment about weapons of mass destruction. Are we supposed to believe that these yahoos have nukes and biochemical Scud missiles and whatever the fuck used to be classified as a weapon of mass destruction? Or have they simply reclassified that term that was used as a blanket statement to march this country into a war that they still haven't got out of? That statement is now being applied to the average schmo on the street.
Many of the 14 men now facing state and federal charges are seen on evidence videos training with combat-style rifles.
Evidence videos, all right? These are folks just shooting nothing, just like a lot of folks shoot nothing in this country, blowing off some steam or whatever, just firing their rifles. But this has been classified as evidence. These folks filmed themselves, by the way, you know, as most people do. Here they are, essentially being very advanced cosplayers, or at the very least more armed than your typical cosplayer, and they've been branded domestic terrorists in possession of weapons of mass destruction.
Initially last fall, authorities said they were plotting a commando attack on the state capitol and had scouted the governor's vacation home to attack,
very advanced,
Whitmer, and possibly killing her and other officials on live TV.
Let's not forget, okay, these folks said, apparently, this was the accusation, that they were going to kidnap the governor, take her out into the woods somewhere, try her for treason, and then kill her, possibly record it, and then kill her, and then they would overthrow the government. That was the assumption at the time, and of course the natural rebuttal to that is, if that is true, then these people belong in an asylum if they think that's how it works when you overthrow your state governor.
But it wasn't just guns, according to these newly filed court records. Bombs were allegedly part of the grand scheme, and now 3 of the accused Michigan militiamen arrested in the case are facing weapons of mass destruction charges in addition to kidnapping conspiracy. And tonight, for the first time, federal prosecutors described the plot as an act of domestic terrorism. Today, 45-year-old Barry Croft Jr. was the last of 3 defendants to enter a not guilty plea to the weapons of mass destruction charge. He and several others accused of planning to use explosive devices to destroy a bridge near Governor Whitmer's family vacation home that would have taken out her security detail and responding law enforcement teams. 8 accused plotters face state charges in a scheme linked by authorities to a militia group known as the Wolverine Watchmen. Last December, one key player in the case, Ty Garbin, entered a guilty plea to federal kidnap conspiracy charges. He still faces up to life in prison. This man tonight among those in state court, 51-year-old Brian Higgins from the Wisconsin Dells. Higgins was arraigned Tuesday on a felony charge.
That's the face of the new Saddam Hussein, folks.
Of supporting an act of terrorism that could yield him 20 years behind bars.
Bunch of shit, as usual. But that's where it's at now. As you do unto others, so it'll be done to you. The weapons of mass destruction, the hot phrase of like circa 2003, 2004, is now being applied to just regular folks who, over the weekends, fire their rifles and take video about it, and then coincidentally happen to have a phone call about how the things they want to do to the governor, and the FBI and an informant embedded within these folks who probably coaxed them into saying some of these things in the first place. They got it all on tape. They arrested them. These guys are being charged with weapons of mass destruction, and it's only the beginning, because they're gonna use that for a lot more people in the days ahead. I don't even know if they had any bombs, but they're somehow gonna be accused of weapons of mass destruction. Blowing up a bridge is now the equivalent of nuking an entire city, because that's what that charge used to be. But they've peeled away at it just that little bit. You gotta love the feds, man. From the absurd to the even more absurd, to put a bow on this whole mess. UFOs, folks. That's right, the Martians are coming. No longer confined to the fringe, UFO theories move into the mainstream. You cannot turn on the news now or go through the internet without hearing something about UFOs and objects that are more advanced than anything we could have imagined and may belong to a different civilization and yada 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 yada, right? The kind of stuff that you would have found on like on a fringe podcast or fringe radio show years and years and years ago is now getting spouted from the rooftops of your CNNs and your BBCs and your France 24s and all these international press. They're on the alien bandwagon. We speculated last year that this was probably a teeing up for some sort of false flag UFO attack, but who knows? It may be even more basic than that. It may just be that the Pentagon wants more money to, track these so-called UFOs. Maybe someday, folks flying their drones will be classified as UFO terrorists if you're just, taking video with your drone in your backyard. You're flying a UFO based on this act that eventually passed about UFOs and monitoring UFOs. Pentagon's gonna have a lot of money to splurge to track these things. Space Force, remember that? That was Trump's baby. That's probably gonna be used for UFOs in some capacity. Stick a whole lot more satellites in the sky so they can, spy on you when you're in the shower and stuff, and it's all in the name of fighting UFOs, folks. It would be so great if like an actual UFO showed up in the middle of like a false flag UFO staged attack by the FBI or the CIA, when they're out there trying to convince people of a fake alien invasion and some real aliens show up. That would be hilarious. But this is, even the folks who've been chasing after Area 51 and all the UFO chasers these years, like they're not eating this. They know this is bullshit. Like when your Don Lemons of the world start talking about UFOs, it's time to pick up a new hobby. So at the very least, some folks are probably gonna just back away from this. The true believers, anyway, they're probably just gonna tune out of all this coverage that they're getting now. Don't expect this to not have some consequence on the UFO community. They're too smart to fall for this shit. I hope. But all these stories, what do they all have in common? Your UFOs, your lab leaks, all this stuff that was once upon a time fringe and is now mainstream, just goes to show you how quickly and how easily the narrative can change, how these so-called experts at the drop of a hat can say something that they've denied or ridiculed or rejected for years and years. It's like we're getting hollowed out for some grand fuck you of some sort. Like they're just trying to destroy and defile any like long-held beliefs, so that it gets to a point where everything that sounds real is fake and everything that sounds fake is real, and you get spun around in so many directions that you don't know left from right and up from down and all this. Like, who knows? And as for these fallen gods, your Whitmers and your Cuomos and your like these gods of 2020, like the fact that they're now getting moved off the chessboard, are they paving the way for something a lot worse? Were they the test dummies for some really totalitarian fuckers that are on the way? Maybe they, we might come to miss Whitmer and her weapons of mass destruction terrorists who tried to kill her. We might come to miss these people when a new brand of crazy takes over, and those folks have all of this power built in, thanks to the Whitmers of the world, thanks to the Cuomos, thanks to the Faucis, who will have long since been dismissed by that point. Some other super billionaire with dreams of mass control who's not Bill Gates comes in and actually has the common sense to pull it off and not hang out in jets with pedophiles to ruin his own credit. Like, we may get a whole new wave of far more dangerous people in the years ahead. That's one theory. Or it could just be that the powers that be they're just toying with us, getting us worked up and homicidal because our leaders are such douchebags that it's easier to do than ever before. Get us all chasing shadows. Who knows for sure? I can only hope that throughout all of this, the people just lose interest. Simple as that. People just lose interest. They tune out of the UFOs. They tune out of the WMDs and the lab leaks and the let's get China and all this stuff. Like, they just tune out of all of that, and say to hell with this. That would be the best outcome of all of this. Who knows if that's going to happen or not, but that would be the best outcome, is that we all just lose interest and refuse to play ball. Because that's the only way I think this is going to work out for the good. All this groundwork that's been laid into turning, your Agenda 2030s and your great resets and all the groundwork that's getting put into this, all the propaganda that's getting shoved down your throat and injected into your body day after day. The hope here is that folks just lose interest and, we don't try to play 3D chess with these people. Just turn them off. Turn off the TV. Don't watch their stupid videos. Don't go to their stupid sites. Just don't pay no mind to the crazies or the crazy that they're trying to sell you. Because I think the only way we win at this point is if we stop playing. Because the only way they win is if you play. So don't play.